Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second day of the 12th Annual University of Waterloo Teaching and Learning Conference. We hope you all had a great day yesterday, enjoying opportunities to learn and connect with colleagues from here at UW and beyond. As I did yesterday, I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the territory on which the University of Waterloo resides. The University of Waterloo is located on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. Our keynote address today has been sponsored by the Faculty Association of the University of Waterloo, who have been an amazing partner over the years with our conference and have always been incredibly supportive. I'm very thankful that the president of the Faculty Association, Dan Brown, will be introducing our keynote speaker today, Dr. Norm Vaughan. So Dan, please take it away.
Great. Can you hear me?
I mean, sorry. Yes, again, Dan.
You're awesome. Good. Okay. There's that wonderful moment in 2021 where we're not quite 100% sure everything's lined up properly. So I'm glad to know that this is good. Thanks very much, Kyle. I'm delighted to introduce today's keynote speaker, Dr. Norm Vaughan, on behalf of FAO. So I'll start off by giving a quick overview about FAO, and then I'll introduce Professor Vaughan. FAO is the association that represents faculty members at Waterloo. We advocate for academic freedom, for high quality teaching and scholarship, and for equity at the university. Our members are passionate about high quality teaching, and especially with our wonderful students here at Waterloo. And so as Kyle says, we've always supported the UW Teaching and Learning Conference. And this year is obviously no exception. It's particularly important as our members and so many other people at U of W have to adapt to the new realities of teaching in the pandemic, and also ask questions about what do we do now with everything we've learned in the past year. Specifically to the topic of Professor Vaughan's lecture, we worry a lot about questions about workload and equity in online and blended learning. And so I'm particularly interested in Professor Vaughan's presentation and learning from him. So now I'll just take a few moments to introduce our speaker. Dr. Norm Vaughan is professor in the Department of Education and Community Education at Mount Royal University in Calgary. He's best known for his work on blended learning, which I think is what we're going to hear about today, and in a framework that he's built with some colleagues, Randy Garrison and Marty Cleveland Innes, called the Community of Inquiry Framework. His teaching background includes graduate and undergrad courses in educational technology and K-12 teaching. He's written books on blended learning, building blended learning environments, creating and sustaining communities of inquiry, and also a book on blended learning in higher ed. So clearly he's an expert on the topic that we all want to learn about. He's the co-founder of the Blended Online Design Network and is an editor of many journals in his field, like the International Journal of Mobile and Blended Learning. He's a passionate educator and gives many keynotes. In the last year, when we've all been struggling in this environment, he's done a lot of workshops and addresses to help us as we learn how to do blended learning and learn collaboratively. All of that is great. And then while I was reading his bio, I realized that Professor Vaughan probably taught one of my close friends when she was getting her master's degree in education at Calgary. It turns out, in fact, that's true. And so I'm going to finish this introduction by giving her description, where he described him as, quote, so lovely and kind. These days, that counts a lot too. With that, I'll turn this over to Professor Vaughan and look forward to his remarks. Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for those kind words. And I really think it's so important in these days, everything, the focus on equity. So like Dan said, the one real thing that I've learned this year is the importance of collaboration. What I've learned is that you cannot do this alone. You need to definitely work with the team. Teaching in a virtual environment definitely is a team sport. So I'm going to have two amazing co-pilots with me, Kyle and Kristen, and I'll explain their roles in this session in a minute. But the other thing I really want to emphasize, as Dan mentioned, most of my experience online is with grad students. And like all of us, this was a bit of a wake-up call for me. For quite a while now, I've been teaching first year students. It's such a joy to have people coming in. They're so excited. I'm in the education department right now. But what's been really fascinating for me is we're all new to this environment, but whether we like it or not, the students have more diverse experience than we do. And it's been really exciting for me to learn from my first year students, because they're exposed to so many different courses, perspectives, so many ways of engaging in this virtual environment, is they've shared some really interesting strategies with me. And I'd like to do a few for you. Now, just before we get started, I want to explain what Kyle and Kristen are going to do. Just so excited to be part of this conference, and my head is just throbbing from everything I learned yesterday. I'll be honest, I'm a little overwhelmed. I did a lot of tweaking of these slides. We'll see how it works. But I need everybody to help out here, and I'll explain why. We're all going to benefit. We're going to do some crowdsourcing here. We've got 4 activities, and I need everybody to go heavy. I mean heavy in the chat room. If you go, oh, wow, that brings up a great idea that I'm already doing in this area, or I'd like to share this resource, please do it. So the chat is where we're going to have our ongoing conversation, okay? And Kyle, no pressure, but Kyle's going to look at the chat room. This is kind of neat. I can only see my Zoom screen. The other thing is, I'm sure, I hope this is going to stimulate some questions, and you go, like, I really don't agree with that. Like, where's that coming from? So Kristen is going to be the woman who's in charge of the Q&A. In my experience, I promise I'll try and leave some time at the end for Q&A, but often we run out of time, and I don't want to bleed into anybody else's time. So here's the deal. We've got Kyle involved with the chat. We've got Kristen in Q&A. What I'm going to come in and do later today is synthesize. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in the chat, but I'm going to try and create a little framework, a little resource document based on the framework I'm going to show you, send it back to Kyle and Kristen because they can share it out. And again, this is an activity I got from my students. And I was at sessions yesterday about on grading. It really is interesting. We talk about assessment as currency, everything like that. But students, they want to have skin in the game. They always don't need a mark for doing things. And this is something the students, my first year students, have started doing with me, mainly because well, part of it is their board, but they really want to engage with others. So initially it was just sort of random, and then we created a sign-up list. So different people were assigned for doing different roles, recording, whatever. And then it was really fun. I would stay with a group at the end of class and we debrief about what happened. It was really great feedback in the moment. You know, Norm, you really got to stay focused. Stop telling us stories and things, well, or keep focused, make sure the story has a purpose. And then what we do is mainly they'd collaborate, put together a bit of a summary of what happened. And it was more than, play by play. It was notes, the key concepts, the resources, and then they'd post that. You're using Learn, Desire to Learn. We'll talk about that. And they'd post it in the learning management system. Okay, the third thing I really want to talk to, I am a bit of a fanboy. I was so excited when Kyle and Kristen invited me to be part of the session. And I'll be honest, the main reason I wanted to be part of it is I have never heard Sally and Kay speak. So this was the tipping point for me. And in a session yesterday, I didn't realize that Graham Gladwell, Malcolm's father, unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he was a faculty member in your civil engineering department. I think that's so cool. So honestly, Sally was the tipping point for me, because whether I like it or not, I'm involved in a lot of research. Dan mentioned I write a bit. I do write quite a bit. I'm hardwired to create content, and that's what I like to do. I like to throw a lot of stuff at students. In a session yesterday, gosh, I'm going to talk a lot about that, was Skid. James Skidmore was the coordinator. That again, my apologies, I wasn't able to go to everybody's session, but they really talked about, how we're transitioning in this, that we're really focusing on facilitating student learning, not just dumping and delivering content on students. And Sally, this is a paper. Oh, Kyle, please, can you share the URL for the slides in this? Just at my age, it was wonderful yesterday, but I find it's difficult to see the slides. So Kyle, if you could just put the URL for the slides there, that way you'll have your own copy, and pretty well on every slide, I've embedded some resources that have been useful for me. This is a paper that Sally wrote in 2004, and it's where the rubber hit the road for me. Norm, you can talk up a storm, you can do everything, but where the real rubber hits the road is the way that you design and implement your assessment processes. So what I'd like to do to start this session is just building a little bit on Sally's work. So the next slide, again, I'm a geologist by trade, but got into corporate training with Esso and Exxon, realized I like people more than rocks. And I'm learning still a lot about research in the different discipline areas. And I'm involved in sort of social science and humanities research. And we really emphasize to our grad students and ourselves the importance of triangulation, the importance of not relying on one source of data. So with me, you know, dealing with educational review, maybe there's surveys, there's interviews, there's focus groups, but I'm not relying on one source of data. And I think that's so important as we go into, and I'm going to use the term flipped. This is the focus for Waterloo. So you're going to see this throughout, and we're going to figure out what that means in a minute. But the idea that students are receiving feedback in more than one form. We know the importance of, you know, self-reflection, metacognition, students learning how to learn. We're going to talk a lot, my gosh, the sessions yesterday about how students can give meaningful formative feedback to each other. But this is something they have maybe not been conditioned so they know how to do. And finally, not only can students get feedback from us, but from our colleagues, experts in the field. Okay, let's get this show on the road here. So it's wonderful. This is a close colleague of Sally's. Unfortunately, Paul passed away a few years ago. Paul was the one, he's an Aussie, but he was the founding director. He founded the Higher Education Academy in the UK, wrote a seminal book that a lot of us in faculty development still use, 2003, Learning to Teach in Higher Education. My God, it really has served the test of time. But I love Paul's quote about assessment, you know, really getting to know our students and the quality of our learning. But my experience, and I missed the session, we'll get it. There was a great assessment for learning. How important it is to listen to our students. What are the students' perspectives about assessment? And I do this at the beginning of class in my first year over and over and over. It's an anonymous survey, one word. Please describe for me, what's your perspective? What do you think about assessment? And it's nothing to do about learning. It's fear, stress, anxiety, and judgment. And I don't want to criticize the Alberta education system too much, but I will. It's really focused on high stakes assessment. And after 12 years of education, unfortunately, our students are conditioned for pleasing external bodies, not internalizing the assessment process. So this is another fella that I've leaned on heavily. I know for a lot of us, it's intuitive, but I always have to remind myself, you know, and I know people, diagnostics, maybe not their favorite word, self-assessment, but there is some really cool stuff and some cool sessions we've seen about how students through the reflective process can really figure out where they are in their learning, but they can help us with these digital tools so we can start to see different trends about where students are. You know, formative, this is something that I think we can really help students. Again, we go through a peer editing process for our research. We can really help students with this. There's some incredible strategies and techniques we can use. And again, summative plays a role. It's really important. All of us, you know, with our discipline areas, with our professional bodies, this is a really important thing. So let's just remember that as we move through it. Okay. Hopefully, Ontario and Alberta, we got to get those numbers down. It's interesting. In the States, there's a big group. It's called EDUCAUSE. Some of you may have heard it. This week, they just released their annual report, the Horizon Report. The number one thing that came out from students is they want to get back on campus. Listen, I'm really hoping this has been a transitional period for us. I miss it. I'm sure you do. I'm going to have to get a new couch after this. I'm getting back problems because of sitting too much. But let's remember that. is we've learned some valuable lessons in this virtual environment. But again, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to go back. How do we meaningfully integrate and connect these two environments? What we've learned the past year with what we've known for years and years and years. So at Waterloo, it's really exciting. I had a chance to speak with some of your teaching fellows virtually on Monday, working with Donna, Kyle, and Kristen. You're going to be taking on this flipped classroom approach. You know, I don't care what we call it, remote teaching, emergency teaching, flip, blended, whatever. My experience is this terminology is new to students. They don't have a clue what we're talking about. And I really emphasize this when you start next fall, whatever you're doing, I really think it's important to engage the students in a conversation, because in your mind, you may be 100% clear what flip means for you. You may put it in the course outline. My experience, it's in one ear, out the other. So what I'd like to do is engage you in a conversation, and I'm sure you've done this, but my students, my first years love to do this. We call it a chat waterfall. Kyle, I'm going to need your help because I can't see the chat, but here's what I want you to do is, if I could get everybody, don't click enter. Okay, the key is don't do enter yet. So first, if everybody could grab the chat, it's over on the right hand side, and we'll talk about the conference system in a minute, but hopefully you're seeing a chat window over there. So could everybody first type? Don't do enter. We don't want to see your stuff yet. So the way this is going to work is we're all going to click at the same time, and then we're going to see this incredible waterfall of responses. So everybody, please take a moment and type your definition in, okay? And Kyle, you're on standby. My teammate, Kyle, my guy at the side, you're there, Kyle. I know you're there. So take a moment, please type in your definition, okay? Definition in the chat box, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, everybody click enter. So everybody on your keyboard, enter. And Kyle, I'm crossing my fingers. Kyle, can I hear your wonderful voice?
I'm going to help you, Norm. I'm going to help you. I'm triaging with Kristen. She's going to give me stuff, and we're going to work on this.
Work with us. But Kyle, are you at least seeing a trickle? Maybe it's not a waterfall yet, but at least are we seeing somebody has tried to put their definition up a flipped classroom?
I believe so. Again, Kristen's going to be feeding me the responses in.
Okay, so right. You and I. So Kristen, can we hear your wonderful
I got
voice?
some. I got some, Norm. Here we go.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So Kyle, your choice. It's like, you know, we're playing bingo. You get to pick the bingo ball out. So again, Kyle's doing this randomly. He's not, you know, it may not the best or worst, but Kyle, can you maybe just give us one or two definitions?
For sure. So
Thank you.
So here's one: work on problems in lecture rather than lecture or presentation, where students do learning before class and then discuss as a group in person. It might be input habits outside of class, practice in class, using face-to-face time for active learning. How's that, Norm, for a starting point?
Kyle, you are the same. And Kristen, this is great. But Kyle, what I need you and Kristen to do, because I always forget to do this, at the end of the session, you folks are the ones who need to copy and paste the chat into a document, because I promise I'll go in and synthesize it after. Okay, so the University of Waterloo, a lot of what I've done here is linked to their work. So they've done some incredible work around flipped classrooms. So again, these are resources I really encourage not only Waterloo faculty, but if you're at other institutions, you're going to go this way. They've got so much cool stuff to support this. The one thing that I'm hearing as Kyle pulls out these definitions, it's the integration between what's happening in and out of class. And honestly, we want students to be active and engaged in all environments. So just because I've done a few things, let's see what I've done. So when we think, especially from a Eurocentric perspective, again, Bologna they say they're older than the UK folks, but you know, we look at Bologna, University in Bologna, Oxford, Cambridge, up in Edinburgh, in the 1500s, whatever. Really rich environment, but it was sort of that tootie to tutor. It was all about conversations, small groups, whatever. We've been doing online for quite a while. Our nursing faculty talks about using the phone. I mean, we were doing this before the internet, guys. I mean, there was synchronous stuff on the phone, online learning. But my gosh, this is where let's give a shout out to Waterloo. Desire to learn, using learn. I remember it was about 6 years ago when David was still, he left you as the president, but he was your governor general. And it was one of those higher education talks of Ontario. It was actually in the Royal York Hotel. It was David and John Baker speaking together. It was like a father-son conversation. But you folks, it's wonderful because I think a lot of you know the story of D2L, that I think John was in 3rd or 4th year. It was an undergraduate project, but it was so cool. Not only it was a merging of online and on campus at Waterloo, but it was a merging of student and faculty work together. So just building on that, my gosh, how many years ago was that? It's really dangerous because once you got a book there, you can't take it back. But I'm working on another book with Randy and Marty right now. And the two things, when I go back to that book, that I think really are still important is design. If we're going to make this work, we can't make it up. There's got to be a plan, or it's just going to go off the rails. But the one thing I've learned, and I heard this yesterday as well, is how important, I think flexible is a better word than organic. I don't know where we got organic from, but the flexibility, and this is really important. So what I do is every fall, I teach a course on educational technology, and I teach 3 sections. So obviously, same course outline, same assessment structure, but the difference is I have 3 different groups of humans. So the way that we interact, the different roles are quite different. It really is, it's just mind blowing. You go, my gosh, it's supposed to be the same course, but I'm dealing with 3 humans. So just the only thing I can remember out of that book is the importance of design, but how it has to be flexible because we're dealing with different groups of humans every semester. The other thing I've learned, and this is so important in the flipped classroom, this is not a binary thing, that one's better than the other. Let's, as we get ready for next fall, and let's get everybody vaccinated, please, please, please. And somehow it's gonna work. But let's reflect. What did we love about face-to-face? And we're going to look at that in a minute. What are the affordances? What are the strengths? What are the really cool things we all get excited about? And let's not again throw the baby out of bathwater. What are some of the things that work this year in the virtual environment? Okay. And what we want to do, and we're going to work on it now, is how do we integrate and connect them? Because this is one of the dangers. And there's a woman in the States, Carol Twigg, who talked about the course and a half syndrome when we go flipped or blended, that we end up designing 2 courses that don't meet. We just overwhelm the students. They can't see the forest through the trees. And my students keep telling me, especially the grads, Norm, remember, less is more. Focus on conceptual understanding, not content overload, which you always do. Okay, so finally, here's what we're going to do, and I'll make sure we've got the time to do it. Design, okay, design. But let's focus specifically on designing using an assessment framework. So let's go and look at some of Kay and Sally mentioned those 2 together have 70 friggin' years of experience. And this is one of their colleagues down in the corner, John Biggs, and they talked about their task generator. And this is really based on John's work around constructive alignment. John worked for a number of years at the University of Hong Kong. You can read his work. He's gone back to his native Tasmania, and holy jumping, because I know, Sunyan, we've got some people in environmental studies. If you think things are not happening in the world, look at Tasmania. And John has become the leader in Tasmania for environmental change because, my gosh, they're seeing like it's happening at a rapid rate. I mean, they've had to put new colors on the temperature map because, they're regularly having days over 40 C. So we've got this idea that, assessment drives learning, and it can really condition students' approaches to learning. All of us are pretty good about, writing those fancy learning outcomes, Bloom's taxonomy, getting up to evaluation, creativity. But where the rubber hits the road is how we're designing our assessment activities. Okay. A guy that we don't hear a lot of is Gordon Pask. He passed away quite a long time ago, but he was the graduate advisor for a lot of these. And I'm so glad that Sally shared the website with us. You go in there, a lot of the work, especially with David Nicol, who's still active up in Scotland, it's about that, it's conversation. Just like learning is a two-way street. It's not just about delivering content. It's not just about us delivering feedback for the students. It's having a conversation. Students having a conversation with themselves, self-assessment, students having a conversation with others, peer feedback, students having a conversation with us. And we'll talk about that because that's really tricky in those large lectures, scalability, but also students have conversations with experts in the field. So just to remember, feedback is a two-way street. Okay, so it came up in flipped classroom, and that's what I wanted to see. We got stuff happening, and we've done it. Somebody loves to tease me. There's a great YouTube video out there, Blended Learning 1.0. It's the Middle Ages, the invention, the book. And it's so funny. It's an IT guy showing a faculty member, I think it's a monk, how to open, close a book and read it. Okay. But I think if we're going to make this flipped classroom work, what we've got to do is work on integrating, making sure what we're asking students to do before class, during, and after class is connected. And let's work around our assessment tasks to do that. So Kyle, Kristen, I'm going to need some help again here. So what I'm seeing, and I know some of us diagnostic, you think about the cars and gosh, just think how much, well, some of us aren't even using the cars. People have to recharge it. But what can we do in terms of pre-class assignments? And again, it's engaging students, but helping students find out where they are already and getting that feedback to really inform what we're going to do in face-to-face sessions. So we're going to pause here for a moment. Kristen, you're our woman on the chat. Could everybody take a moment, and we're not going to do the waterfall anymore. Just put it in, but please hammer the chat. I really need you to hammer it, because this is where we've got, my wife is an environmentalist. She says the strength of an ecosystem is diversity. We've got people here from the natural sciences, social sciences, the health sciences. So cool how ideas in one discipline we can use in others. So please take a moment. How are you preparing, or how are you thinking next fall to get students ready to be excited to come back to class? I know they want to be there. That's always one of the things we've worried about. If we record our lectures, whatever, what's the value added? Why are they going to come to class? And that'll be the next thing we focus on. But please take a moment in the chat room. What are you already doing? What are the things you're doing? And you could be doing it now. Some of you are probably doing flipped, you're using, I think you're using Microsoft Teams. Some of you are already doing cool stuff. You're using Learn, your D2L site, and you're using Teams. How are you integrating those? How are you preparing students to get ready for MS Teams at the moment? So Kristen, Kyle, feeding me. I'm hoping, and I always hope, Kyle and Kristen, are you seeing at least one really cool
we
idea?
Got some, Norm. We have
oh,
ideas.
Kristen, I'm excited. Can you share one idea with us?
Yeah, so one idea would be maybe like a 10-minute gathering time with a personal chat open before they come, just so students can talk to each other, say hello. Maybe one would be someone reads a business case beforehand, answers maybe a true to false in D2L desired to learn for class, and then in class maybe would lead into small group discussions. Do you want some more, Norm?
Kyle, that's perfect. But that last one was so critical, because whatever we want to do leads into the session. Now, I forgot about that, because here's a guy who's supposed to know how to use technology, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But I don't know if you're like me. Back in the day, do you guys remember overhead projections? Do you remember acetates? The bulb would always be burned out. So Kyle, others, I think it's so important, because the keeners are the ones who often show up in our lecture theaters, classrooms early. these are the people we need to listen to, because the reason they came early is they often had problems. It's more than social. They want to talk to us. And it's sort of like the canary in the coal mine. Those are the people that we need to listen to so we can build on for the other entire. But what was Norm doing? Norm was crawling around. Oh, frig, you know, the Ethernet's not working, the lights aren't working, whatever. This is where we really need to listen to students. And it's been exciting. I'm sure you've seen it in Teams. Students just aren't bored. They'll show up to our Teams session before we do. So I think that's so important. And it's something I didn't think about. So that's something I need to remember. Thank you, whoever do that. So please keep in the chat room adding them. So I'm just going to, some of the things I observed yesterday, some of the things, this is coming from my students. Listen, I missed the session yesterday, but I know that's going to be recorded or short, but there was a session specifically on this, you know, designing activities to really improve student learning outcomes, but also to sort of gauge how we can use the face-to-face session. So again, what's old is suddenly new. This is Gregor Nordovak. He was with the U.S. Air Force. He was Indiana University, Bloomington. I don't know where Gregor is this day, but I put a link in there. There are so many cool ideas because, you know, we always ask the student to do a reading. I'm sure a lot of you have been working with the Waterloo librarians, your instructional librarians. Part of it is literacy. I'll be honest, you know, I forget at Mount Royal, they told me, I think about 80% of our budget is online resources. And I'll be honest, I'm the worst one. I don't know how to use our online library, but this is really cool because again, you know, we talk about information, digital literacy, working with our librarians. So finding really great readings that help student connect with what we know. A lot of us, I'm teasing, you know, we've spent some time creating some really cool videos. And I know a lot of you worked really hard to get them shaped into a meaningful time. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's use those videos next fall. But the key is, let's work on an activity. Now, you're using Learn. I love how you call it Learn. It is Brightspace, D2L, whatever John and the team's calling it these days. But what the fancy name is, they're called knowledge probes. Don't you love it, all the new terminology? But what I've learned through the folks at D2L is get students to do a reading, get students to watch a video, get them to do something, but then in D2L, create an anonymous, or it could be not anonymous, a quiz. So make sure the quiz, the questions focus on conceptual understanding, you know, mitosis, whatever, it's really cool. But they really hammered to me, the final question is, what didn't you understand about that reading? What didn't you understand about the video? What didn't you understand about the activity? And what do we need to go into more detail when we physically get together or we're in MS Teams? Okay, can you remember that? The other thing, oh my gosh, Skid, we went, James Skidmore, I loved it. I was blown away. This session, I was actually scared to do this keynote after going yesterday. Holy jumping. In our German, our humanity, man, they were doing some cool stuff about online discussions. If you want to know online discussions, go there. It was amazing. It was a student assessment in collaborative learning environments. The one thing I've learned, it's from our Dean of Arts right now, Jen Pettit. Yeah, she comes from Southern Ontario as well. What she really taught me, and again, this will be a little tricky. I'm not sure how to scale this. So maybe 3rd and 4th year classes, but how important it is to link the online discussion with the face-to-face discussions. As we all know, students find their voice, their confidence in different ways. And I'm going to be really gentle about this because I'm located, I live right beside Mount Royal, and I live right across the street from the Tsuut'ina First Nation. So it's really cool. I also went to that Indigenous panel yesterday afternoon as well. We've got a real mix. Dan mentioned the importance of equity, the importance of extending different perspectives. So Jen teaches a lot of courses in Canadian studies, Canadian history, and I think we're all relearning about Canadian history. I'll be honest, I grew up in Guelph, Ontario. You know, when Kyle does the land acknowledgement, I have not a clue. You know, I know Brantford, the Six Nations, but I really don't know it. And so in Jen's course, it's really interesting because we have Indigenous students, and I'll be honest, we have some students in Alberta who've got some fairly conservative, I'll be honest, fringing on extreme right-wing perspectives. It comes up in the online discussion. Jen always asks for permission, but she gets them. Maybe they're not comfortable quite to verbalize it in class, but she asks, can I show those quotes in class? And you may do it. But it's really neat because, again, it's agreeing to disagree, but it's important to understand everybody's perspective. And we all know right now that, my gosh, especially in the United States, we've gone into fantasy land. So this is more an opinion, like what you said, where does it come from? Is it something you read? Is it experience? But getting rid of this fantasy land. Okay, keep moving, Norm. The other thing, Diana, this is a shout out for you. Diana is the teaching fellow over in math. There is incredible application here. This is a little infomercial. This is from a good friend of mine, Claude Laflamme, a professor in mathematics at UC. I think he may have sold this actually to Prentice Hall or McGraw-Hill. But what's so exciting for me is we've gone way beyond multiple choice quizzing and things like this. I heard yesterday in a lot of the sessions, it's about the thinking process, problem solving, about making the problem solving visible. This is the coolest software. Go in, kick the tires. If you use the textbook, maybe you can already use it. Maybe you have other textbooks. But what I like about these applications is they're really focused on problem solving, making thinking visible. And then it hooks into D2L so easily. So if you want to use this for low stakes assessment, students can use it 3 times. You can use it for participation marks or whatever. It hooks in, but it gives you some, learning analytics, big data. I forget what we're calling it now, but it'll all feed into your Learn dashboard. So you go, oh my gosh, if it's calculus, these theorems, they're not getting it. It's something we're going to need to do problem solving. I'm going to need to go through that process in my physical classroom. The other thing, and I know I'm late to the game in gamification. I know Kyle and Kristen are experts. This is a free app. It's from Singapore Management University, but it is so cool. The apps they have out there, the games that students can play on their phone. But again, it's about problem solving, and this data gets fed specifically into something. John's been working with this a lot. He still looks like he's 19 years old. I think he's well into his 40s now. But again, it's really cool. Students doing games or whatever, but it's accounting, it's case studies, simulations or whatever, but all that data is going into your D2L site. So it's really helping inform what you're going to do face to face. So again, just some design considerations. Focus for me is diagnostic assessment. It's helping students. I think it was David Ozzabal back in the 60s, Joe Novak with concept mapping. But helping, it's an advanced organizer, figuring out stimulating connections and connecting with students' prior learning. And for us, my God, just the data that's getting fed into our Learn site so that we can really be connecting, really making this a rich experience when students come back on campus or when we're doing team session. Okay, Kyle and Kristen, back to you. I'll make sure we wrap this up at 1, I promise. This is where I'm scared. It's the emperor has no clothes. I'm hardwired. That's really why I got into corporate training with Exxon and Esso, because I love to talk. So you mean I can't talk for 3 hours? You mean I'm going to have to create space for students' voices and conversation? This is an area that I'm still challenged. If we got all this stuff happening online in flipped classrooms, where's the value added? Where is the rich learning going to happen when students come back onto campus at Waterloo, Laurier, Western, or even at Mount Royal University? So Kyle and Kristen, we're going to give people just a few minutes, but this is where I'll be honest. I'm a lectureaholic. I love to talk, and I see we got some Stephen Brookfield sessions coming on later, and I'll just do a little quote from Stephen Brookfield because you mentioned Randy Garrison. Stephen Brookfield was Randy Garrison's doctoral advisor. So a lot of Randy's work was influenced by Stephen. If you don't know Stephen, he's still, I think, at St. Thomas University. That's in either St. Paul or Minneapolis. I forget where it is. but it's really cool. When you talk to Stephen, you know, students want a learning experience. They don't want a self-help, an experience. What Stephen used to do is he'd get his group of students together, you know, at the beginning of class, they'd introduce themselves, tell how many dogs, cats, whatever. And he said, gosh, that made me feel good. Then one day he was lining up in Starbucks and they didn't see him, but his student said, that was the worst experience ever. I felt like it was psychobabble. Like I did not sign up to learn about other people's, you know, problems or idiosyncrasies. I signed up for a learning experience. So Kyle, Kristen, do we have any neat ideas coming up in the chat room about what people are planning to do when we're back on campus in Waterloo? Kyle, Kristen?
Yeah, I got a couple here. So students working on problems in small groups, maybe playing probability games, teaching each other, like at a jigsaw activity, forms of two-stage testing as well.
Yes.
Those are the ones we have so far, Norm.
Perfect. And again, please keep coming them in. But this is what I want to hear. And this is a messy area. And this is where I think we're going to need for our center for teaching and learning, teaching centers, academic development, whatever we call them, because this is not natural for me. This is going to be a real role adjustment when I go back in the fall, is sharing the responsibility with students. You know, I love being at the sage on the stage. I'm not sure quite what a guide on the side is, but creating assess activities where students are giving feedback to each other. So here's some things that I've learned over the years. If I ask students to do anything before class, that's the way I have to start. I learned this, a fellow Bruce Ravelli, free assessment, a survey tool. I'll make sure I share that. Bruce is out at the University of Victoria now. But you know, again, if we did a little reading survey or whatever, that's the way we start with class. We share the feedback with students. So students go, oh my gosh, yeah, like only 30, like I'm not alone. I don't have a clue what mitosis is. Or people see, yeah, this is what I want us to focus in our face-to-face section. Now, I learned that you've had Eric Mazur from Harvard University at your institution. People, oh, come on, Norm, this is passé. I don't think so. And especially with large groups of people. So Eric's the one, you know, they're not clickers anymore. The kids have phones, they use phones, but Eric and that fellow Crouch, you know, they talk about peer instruction. And I think this is really, really important. And I'm going to hopefully demonstrate why in our large sections, but just not in the sciences. We're using this humanities or whatever, especially at the beginning of a semester where we're trying to build a safe, trusting environment with a large group of people. We don't want to put anybody on the spot. I heard yesterday in some of the sessions, people are talking about Eric Mazur's work. You know, short-term pain for long-term gain is really developing those conceptual questions. You know, they're not black and white. They get students to struggle or whatever. Putting the question up, getting the students to vote, showing the results, they're all over the place, getting students in a large group to put down their clickers, and in the top diagram, working with 2 or 3 other students to work through it, showing that if we work together, you know, I heard it yesterday, we heard it all over, it takes a community to raise a student, is showing that if we work together, we re-vote, we're going to do it. Now, the important thing is developing that comfort, because often students are hardwired. They're going to sit in that area for the entire semester. So let's help them get to know who's there. You know, if they're comfortable, let's exchange text messaging and everything. Let's start building this idea of constructive and critical friends. Okay, next slide. So, you know, this has been going on for a while, and this is a paper that's actually, some of you may remember this guy, Peter Senge. Peter was doing work with corporations in the 90s. He was talking about learning organizations, and this is what the University of Waterloo is. I grew up in Guelph. I always wanted to go to Waterloo, couldn't get in. I had to go down the road to Queens. But remember, this isn't about student-centered. This isn't about teacher-centered. We are universities. We are learning-centered universities. And my experience is students need structure. They need very safe environments to learn to give constructive or critical feedback. I was talking with the teaching fellows on Tuesday. It starts with kindergarten, 2 stars and I wonder. So just helping students develop, and we're going to talk about it. There was a great session yesterday about you've got a friend, and you do. And it can happen in large lectures. You know, I know Eric Mazur, he's been on campus, you've learned it. But again, the clickers is the catalyst for students to start to get to know each other, for us to work through activities. I've got a link there. There's really some extensive work, stage 1, 2, 3 in humanities or whatever, but helping students learn to trust each other and see by giving each other feedback, they get different perspectives, different ideas. And you know, the old quote, to teach is to learn twice. The other thing, this comes out of sociology, structured reading groups, but in our area, it's a woman, Melanie Rathbun, who just stepped down as chair of our biology department. This is the cat's ass. This is really cool stuff. And I've got a link that shows how to do it. But what happens is you get students, you create up these groups of usually 5 to 6 students. They're assigned. You can mix them up halfway through if you want to get them working with other groups. They're assigned groups. There's a reading, there's a small online discussion where they take on different roles, you know, devil's advocate, everything. But then we provide them with class time to meaningfully meet and create a summary about the reading. And this is so important because I know we know this in all the disciplines, and I'm the worst from it as well. Students are challenged for deep reading. Most of us online now, we scan, we don't read deep. I'd like to, you know, we could do a whole session on that, but the link's there. This has been so powerful. It comes out of sociology, but I've seen it really applied effectively in large classes in the natural sciences. And again, we had a session about collaborative in class assignments. I know we've got Robert with us, the teaching fellow in physics. My gosh, physics has been leading the charge. I heard that you've actually had Carl Wyman, Nobel Prize winner in 1980, the Carl Wyman Science Initiative at UBC. This has been really cool for me. This has been a really exciting collaboration between the University of Calgary and Mount Royal University. I've got a paper there from one of our Mount Royal faculties talking about how laboratorials work. But, you know, this has been a common issue in the natural sciences, is the disconnect between the lecture, which is often given by a tenured faculty member, and, you know, the tutorials, the labs, which are great, passionate grad students, but the two groups don't connect together, and it's just all over the place. Where laboratorials, this is a picture from U of C. This is what a laboratorial looks like at MIT with a little bit more money. I know Robert, I know others in physics can talk to you about this, but it's exciting. I'm really seeing this model move from the sciences into it. It's interesting. Also, the EDUCAUSE report that came out, and Donna mentioned, this is where you're working at Waterloo. I know we've just got 50 million at Mount Royal to do the same thing, is infrastructure. If we're going to move this, we're going to have to change the physical infrastructure. I know that Western has that Western Active Learning, the WALLS program. I know that you do as well, but it's really about, if we want students to work together, we're going to have to pull out those fixed seats. Okay, keep it moving. So again, I think when we get students together, but again, my experience is this is something that's not intuitive and natural for student, is to know how to give critical instructive feedback. A friend of mine, Walter Archer, talks about pathological politeness. You know, we just don't want to hurt people's feelings. Demonstrating that I'm not taking on other students, I'm helping you, I'm building you up. It's like the peer feedback process we go through. Okay. Time is starting to drip away, and we want to have at least 5 minutes for questions. Last thing, we're not going to do the think, pair, share, is please just use the chat room now. In the chat room, this is always our complaint, is, you know, we get students excited during our classes in the flipped one. How do we maintain that passion? How do we maintain the conversation, the feedback loop once they leave? I just find so many challenges. Here's some ideas I have. We're going to take 5 minutes of that, and then we'll make sure we have 5 minutes for question. So this is old. I think it was Tom Angelo, Pat Cross, their work. They were working at the Center of Learning and Teaching at Harvard University in the 80s, put out a seminal book, Classroom Assessment Techniques. I think it's Portland State has turned it into TechnoCats. You know, simple things. exit things. Again, you don't want to do this over and over, but I put a link. I think it's some university's website. It could be even yours. It's so important we get feedback about our teaching on a regular basis. So, this is one of the easiest ones, the muddy points. After this week or after this assignment, what was your key learning? What did you get out of this? But what are you still confused? What do we need to focus when we get back together for our next teams or our next physical session? This has been exciting for me. I've seen this happen in physics, journaling, really came out of nursing. It's all over the place. What's exciting for me is how we can extend this. Again, I'm not quite sure how we can scale it, but all of you have friends, and it's fascinating. I've got friends that do a lot of work with online teaching. Selfishly, it's kind of fun because a lot of them are retired. They have a little time on their hands. They've written some seminal articles they've even forgot about. So with their permission, I'll be honest, I do this primarily with my fourth and grad students. I ask first my colleagues, would it be okay if my students critique your work? And they go, yeah, I haven't looked, I want to see a fresh eyes look at an article that was written 20 years ago. This was one of the seminal articles by Terry Anderson, who was always Randy Garrison's favorite doctoral student. We'll leave that alone. Here's an article. So there it goes. And then Terry comes in and actually critiques the grad student or an upper year students. My gosh, talk about real learning, talk about feedback, talk about meaningful engagement. It's really exciting on both sides. It's a conversation. The other thing, I think maybe you're already using this. This is out of the University of California at Los Angeles. Unfortunately, they had to, just to keep the thing sustainable. There's a very small site license now. It used to be free. Todd Nickel at Mount Royal is just our guru here. It revolutionized the way that we were doing we call them laboratory manuscripts now. Short-term pain for long-term gain. You as the instructor or teacher have to create 3 pieces of work. But what it's doing, it's training, it's conditioning students to look at and understand what quality, medium, and high quality work is, and the assessment is on the quality of their feedback. I missed it, but my gosh, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've learned that we can provide feedback to students orally and through video. They can hear our voices. And I'll be honest, for lots of us, once we remember what buttons to click, my gosh, it saves a lot of time. And students, I've heard it, really appreciate our voice. Okay, last but not least, Entrepreneurship. They've been doing it forever. These pitches, Shark Tank, Dragon Den. This is really exciting to see what students can do it. You can create private YouTube feeds or whatever. YouTube comes with a discussion forum, and you can keep it closed so that it's not public, but students create a pitch, they create a video, saves a lot of time with presentations. They do the presentations. Then you can bring in experts who normally come on campus the time, and they can give the feedback. Okay, we're just running out of time. This is exciting. I missed it. You're using PebblePad. I saw other people using Google Site. This for me has been so exciting because it really has connected professional practice with what students are doing. We're really creating those growth mindsets, the professional mindset. So here's the deal. We're in Alberta, just like in Ontario, we've got the Alberta's Teachers Association. One of the requirements for professional practice in Alberta is that teachers, these are professional teachers, have to have an annual growth plan. They have to set annual goals at the beginning of a new school year, and they have to document their growth and show their evidence at the end of the year to principals. We've done the same thing in our program. And what's so cool, listen, I'm sure PebblePad will do the same thing. We're a Googleicious. We are a Google enterprise at Mount Royal. So that means Mount Royal students keep their G drives until they pass away, unfortunately. What's exciting for our grads is usually in the first 2 years of professional practice, they float around. They may go to, say, the Waterloo board, then they go to Kitchener, maybe they go to St. Thomas or whatever. So their email, everything flips, but it's a bit of branding for us. We encourage our alumni to use the Mount Royal account and use this. So this is so exciting. This is a woman who graduated, just got Teacher of the Year nominated for Lethbridge, south of us. So it's a marketing thing, but it's so exciting for her to use this and for me to be able to use this as an example and for my undergrads, my first years to connect with her. So again, just what I wanted to wrap up is again, feedback is just not in one way. There's different ways to do it. Okay, I think we're just going to pass on that slide because I want to put it over you. So closing thoughts, what's really exciting for me, the Indigenous panel, again, how much we're learning from our Indigenous partners. This is from the Maori in New Zealand. Yesterday I was at a session. They're talking about two eyes of seeing, the work that's being done in Cape Breton with the Mi'kmaq. There's IQ, the Inuit are doing amazing stuff up in Nunavut. But what's exciting for me is we're moving away from that Eurocentric model of individualization that, you know, again, we've got big problems, big issues to solve. We've got to move to a collaborative environment. And I'm sure you can see this with some of the Indigenous languages in Ontario. I know you can see it with the Dene languages out in Alberta and the Blackfoot languages. So in Maori, they have a word, it's called ako, and it's the reciprocal. They don't have a word for teach. They don't have a word to learn. It's the reciprocation. We work together. Just quickly, I want to get to questions. John Hattie, some of you may be familiar with his work. He's a Kiwi, originally from Auckland. He's at the University of Melbourne. He's done all these meta-analysis studies about assessment. He really is a guru out there. But this is the number one thing that he wants to share with us about his assessment work. It's this idea of making teaching and learning visible. And it's so exciting when we can see learning through the eyes of our students. Again, we're not dumbing it down, but using these digital tools, we can really see where they are in the learning process. And what's so exciting is that empowerment. Students are starting to see themselves as their own teachers. They're developing those metacognitive frameworks. So I'm going to be quiet, and that's it. So I'm hoping, Kristen, again, if people could now use the Q&A, if you could put it in Q&A, but Kristen, I'm crossing my fingers because we only have about a few minutes left. Are there any questions in the Q&A? Over to you, Kristen or Kyle.
Not a question yet. I do have a comment though, Norm. Would you like a comment from someone?
Yes.
Are good. Sure. Really enjoy your presentation, Norm. I could sit easily through any of your lectures. You made me laugh, which means I will remember the pearls embedded in your presentation. So that's a nice takeaway.
Well, that's a great takeaway, but you know, I am really selfish because, you know, I think that's why we all teach is the amount of learning. You know, it is whatever we want to call it, Carol Dweck's growth mindset, but we're open. So Kyle, because I always forget to do this, if you or Kristen, because I'm hoping there's at least a few comments in the chat area. If you could save those, because what I'm doing, I'm taking notes at the different sessions I attend, but Kyle, I want to share those back to you because this is my experience. I'm only going to gossip about me, and we'll see if we have one more question, then we'll finish, is I get overwhelmed with these things. I get so many new ideas, and then I want to try them. And again, I think I overwhelm my students. You know, they can't see the forest through the trees. So I'm hoping I presented a little information you can, but I think it's really important that we look at what Sally and Kay have done. And what I'm trying to do, especially as we move to the flipped classroom, is help students develop their own mental frameworks, help them make connections between what's happening in and out of classrooms, because we're in an exciting but a dangerous time. We've learned a lot, and again, less is more. And Kyle, that's it for me. And if there's maybe one question, if there isn't, Kyle, I can't wait. Are you excited for the coming sessions?
Well, it's gonna be amazing, Norm. I think there's been a lot of really great comments coming through in the chat, a lot of really great resources being shared, which I think is testament to how you've generated excitement amongst all of us to think about some of these different applications. So in any case, we definitely have a lot to share back with you, Norm, that you can then turn around and share back with us as well, if that works for you. Okay.
And again, I want to make it's a continually sharing. So I'll put them whether I like it or not. I'm hardwired for Google. I'll make sure it's accessible for everybody. You don't need a Google account, but please keep to add on these. Make it a living document because it's so exciting. And again, I'm sure you see this in a lot of your different areas. It is the strength of our program right now, especially with this, whatever we would kind of call remote emergency, is our grads, the ones who are out there supporting me and supporting our undergrads. Again, you know, We all know it. It takes a community, and that community must stay together. Kyle, thank you. And Kristen, but Kyle, I always forget, please copy the chat. I always forget to do it.
Norm. Yeah,
okay, good.
It.
Okay, I'll back down. It's just,
Ah.
I forget it, you know, and I'm teasing because obviously in Alberta, we've got freedom of information and privacy. I'll make sure I strip everybody's names out, but we have some conditions for recording our team session, but I am the worst one. I always forget. So again, make sure students love to take on different roles, responsibility when you're using Teams or when you go back on campus in fall, involve everybody. Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thank you so much, Norm. Thank you everyone for attending. Again, Norm, it was fantastic to hear you, to learn from you, to get all these great ideas. I think we'll have lots to work with. So thank you very much, Norm.